right, so next up, we're going to talk about the different shapes of bones, different types of bones, and how we distinguish them. So flat bones are, wait for it, flat, except that none of them are actually flat. The flat bones in your body make up the cranium, the top of the cranium, which is this top part of your head. What the flatness is that they have a thin layer that's basically the same thickness all the way across the bone. So if you take this frontal bone, which is the one that makes up the front of your skull, I know, and it's basically the same thickness all the way across. Your parietal bone here is the same thickness from the top to the bottom. So that's why it's called a flat bone. It's like you took a flat thing and then curved it around the skull, okay? Really big surfaces where we can attach muscles, and we'll talk about that when we do the muscles. Now, short bones are short. They tend to be sort of the same length and width. They're sort of little cubes with compact bone outside and a little pocket of spongy bone on the inside. They include a group of bones that we call the sesamoid bones, which are shaped kind of like little sesame seeds. You have some sesamoid bones on the bottom of your foot. You have a sesamoid bone in your hand right here. Your kneecaps, your patella, are actually really big sesamoid bones. Okay? So the sesamoid bones and are short bones, and all the short bones are like kind of squarish. Okay? They're the cuboidal cells of the skeleton. They're not long, they're not flat, they're sort of squarish. Now, irregular bones don't fit in some other category. So the vertebrae with this wackadoodle shape, those are irregular, okay? And then the long bones are long, I know, right? But they're not all super long. The bones in your fingers and your toes are long bones, even though they can be really short. But it's the way they grow and the parts of them that make them long bones. So they're longer than they are wide. They have a cylindrical shaft with a rounded part at both ends where they attach to other bones, and they have a cavity in the middle, which I'll get to in a sec. So the end parts are called the epiphysis, or epiphyses, ES is the plural. We have a proximal epiphysis and a distal epiphysis. The proximal epiphysis is usually called the head of the bone as well. It's rounded, it's where the bone attaches to another bone and rotates in it. And it's always covered by articular cartilage, which you remember is hyaline. Then there is the metaphysis, which is this thin region, really narrow, between the epiphysis and the diaphysis, which is the main shaft of the bone. The metaphysis contains this region called the epiphyseal plate. Why isn't it called the metaphyseal plate? Okay, the epiphyseal plate is at the end of the epiphysis, and that's called your growth plate. And this is what distinguishes long bones from other bones. Long bones grow in length at this epiphyseal plate. When you're done growing, when you have reached your adult height, this epiphyseal plate fuses and seals and becomes an epiphyseal line of compact bone, okay? So that, we're gonna come back, I'll show you a picture of that. Although you can see it here, this is an epiphyseal line, okay? So this was a layer of cartilage where that bone grew in length. And then after that, the cartilage becomes bone and it becomes a layer of compact bone. Okay, long bones also have a medullary cavity. So this is a cavity in the medulla, right? Cortex outside, medulla inside. It's a cavity in the medulla. So this medullary cavity is filled with bone marrow. Again, in children, this is red bone marrow, which is still making red blood cells and making bone cells. In adults, it usually becomes yellow bone marrow. Most of it turns into fat. So it's good for energy storing. If you have a serious injury, this can turn back into red bone marrow. So if you lose a lot of blood, this can turn back into red bone marrow and make more blood cells faster. if you have a serious bone injury, this can turn back into red bone marrow to help restore that bone. All right, so that's the parts of the long bone. And up next, we're going to talk about how bones form.